Imagine yourself at dawn in January of 49 BC, the cold air cutting your face as you gaze upon a calm river whose banks separated freedom from betrayal. You are about to witness how Caesar crosses the Rubicon, defying the Senate itself and fanning the flames of a Roman civil war that would shake the fracturing republic. On this journey, we will see Pompey the Great summon the Senate in panic, veteran legions choose their fates, and a single step determine the course of empires. In recent years, Julius Caesar had solidified his power in Gaul, amassing wealth and prestige. But back in Rome, his enemies in the Senate demanded he disband his legions or face dire consequences. That political and military standoff echoed through the Republic's corridors, where ambition and tradition clashed like swords. In this video, you will understand every detail of this legendary crossing, from whispered counsel in the Senate's chambers to Caesar's calculating smile as he beheld the Rubicon's waters. Get ready to discover how one irrevocable decision laid the groundwork for a new chapter in Rome's history. But before we dive into these tales and curiosities of the Roman Empire, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss our videos full of secrets and surprises about ancient Rome. Can you feel the weight of that single step that separates obedience from betrayal? That very moment is where our story begins. The crossroads of an empire. In early January of 49 BC, the Roman Senate buzzed with hurried footsteps and whispers of betrayal. Within the Curia Julia, Pompey the Great, flanked by Gaius Claudius Marcellus and other consuls, demanded Caesar's return without a single soldier. Every senator recalled the dark days of Sulla's dictatorship and feared that a triumphant general might impose his own regime. Torches cast flickering shadows on marble columns as messengers bore the Senate's stern commands. "Disband your legions," they decreed. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Caesar studied maps beside Titus Labienus in his camp on the Cisalpine Gaul frontier. The general savored his recent victory over the Gallic tribes, but knew that stepping foot in Italy without his troops meant imprisonment. Suetonius would later record that Caesar felt the weight of each decision as though the future of Rome rested on shoulders as broad as his cuirass. In that stalemate, contradictory orders, disband your troops versus do not cross the Rubicon, turned the tense into a political chessboard. On one side, the cry for legality, on the other, the loyalty of men who had marched and fought under Caesar's standard. In the tense silence that followed, there remained only one choice: submit to Rome's laws or defy the sacred boundary of power. This choice would reveal Caesar's true character and decide the fate of an entire empire. Now watch as he challenges the Rubicon and casts the die of history. The border of destiny, the Rubicon. The Rubicon flowed serenely under the pale moonlight, bordered by willows whose leaves danced in the breeze as if whispering ancestral tales. On the opposite bank, Italy displayed its stone roads and villages, loyal to the Senate, where white and purple togas contrasted with the stillness of the squares. Along the border of the Cisalpine Gaul province, Julius Caesar formed the 13th Gemina Legion into rigid ranks, each soldier adjusting his shield and gladius after years of campaigning in the north. According to Suetonius, that night, something supernatural filled the air. Some legionaries claimed to see ghostly reflections in ancient bronze armor, while others swore they heard voices urging, "Advance!" Unmoved, Caesar waded into the icy water, feeling the weight of his imperium and the clank of each cuirass. Upon reaching the far shore, he raised his gaze and proclaimed, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast, sealing both his destiny and that of the Republic. The crossing was deemed an act of betrayal under Roman law, for an imperium could not cross that boundary without the Senate's permission. In that moment, Caesar ceased to be merely a victorious general in Gaul and became Rome's most powerful or most feared man. His action triggered a definitive rupture in the Republican order, dividing opinions of hero or usurper. It is at this moment that Rome awakens to a new world, and its silent walls will soon tremble with the rumble of impending war. The surprise invasion, Ariminum and the first victories. The morning after crossing the Rubicon, the 13th Gemina Legion advanced in silence toward Ariminum, modern Rimini. Under the mist, the ranks marched with measured steps, shields clinking, in unison, while centurions whispered precise orders. Anticipation and tension hung in the air. The city was a strategic gateway to Italy's heart. At the beat of drums and the raising of Caesar's standard, Ariminum's gates opened without resistance. Calculating the psychological impact, Caesar rode in on horseback, greeting local officials and ordering that citizens' properties remain untouched. This act of clemency impressed the populace and immediately dampened any urge for retaliation. He then marched on Forum Livi, modern Forlì, and Placentia, modern Piacenza. In each place, troops acted with the same surgical precision. They arrested pro-Senate leaders, executed lightning sieges at the gates, and secured the townsfolk's allegiance with promises of justice and stability. In nearby Tabernæ, villagers emerged from their homes to offer supplies and hailed Caesar as a liberator. Within hours, 4 key cities were under Caesar's control, without a single arrow fired. The blend of surprise, military discipline, and political strategy skyrocketed his reputation in Rome, spreading panic among the Republic's defenders. And so, without a single thrust of a spear, Caesar proved that strategic genius could topple even the strongest walls. Rome in panic, Pompey's flight. When news of Caesar's invasion reached Rome, a chill ran through the senator's footsteps. Pompey the Great convened the Senate on the Capitoline Hill and declared a state of civil war. Praetexta togas and Laticlavian robes were abandoned in haste. Scrolls were torn, and rushed carriages clattered through the narrow streets, carrying consuls like Gaius Claudius Marcellus and their allies to the safety of their villas. The Forum, once a hub of debate, stood deserted, save for messengers dispatched to the provinces seeking reinforcements. Inside the Flavian palace, Pompey silently consulted maps of the Mediterranean, plotting defensive and escape routes. He ordered the immediate levying of new legions and sanctioned the mobilization of merchant ships at Brundisium to evacuate loyal civilians and soldiers. Despite his prestige as the Great, Pompey felt the weight of imminent defeat. Rome had never before been so vulnerable to a single general. The calm streets gave way to suspicious glances. Shopkeepers bolted their doors, disoriented veterans rode aimlessly, and families watched empty towers in fear. The dream of preserving the Republic intact now seemed a distant illusion, each echoing footstep a harbinger of a war that would destroy long-standing bonds. The city was divided, and from that point on, personal loyalties would draw the line between heroes and traitors. The power struggle divided hearts. In dozens of makeshift camps along Italy's roads, senators and soldiers faced the same agonizing question: which side to choose? Marcus Junius Brutus, torn between Cato's legacy and his admiration for Caesar, found family duty clashing with political principle. Gaius Claudius Marcellus remained neutral, sending grain convoys both to the Senate and Caesar's camp in a bid to preserve his honor at a time when reputation was more valuable than gold. On the military front, Gaul veterans felt the weight of history in their choices. Titus Labienus, once Caesar's right hand, let resentment guide him. One tense night, he gathered suspicious officers and defected to Pompey, taking with him the troops and gear that had shared northern victories. This betrayal underscored that even bonds forged in battle could shatter in crisis. In torchlit squares, impromptu speeches heralded each shift in allegiance. Caesar lauded his Gallic conquests and accused the Senate of tyranny. Pompey invoked tradition and the sacredness of the Republic, warning that breaking ancient laws would pave the way for tyranny. Persecuted tribunes stood as living symbols of injustice, enriching both narratives. Loyalty now outweighed blood, and every decision shaped Rome's fate. Betrayals and alliances arise when least expected, and next you'll see how words can cut. Deeper than steel, have you ever wondered how this event shaped an empire's destiny? Leave your like now and help us keep bringing stories like this. Caesar's speech and the army's morale. Beneath flickering torchlight in an improvised clearing on the road to Forum Livii, hundreds of legionaries stood in reverent silence. Centered on an uneven rock stood Julius Caesar. With a steady gaze, he began, "We are men of honor, yet we have been betrayed by the Senate. Tribunes sworn to protect the people had their vetoes ignored and were driven into exile." To drive his point home, he brought forward some tribunes who had fled Rome, disguised, now safe before the troops. The resulting outcry was a mix of disbelief and renewed hope. Caesar then recounted each victory in Gaul, battles in the Ardennes, sacrifices on the banks of the river Sabes, and the biting cold of the Helvetian mountains. As he spoke, centurions, like Titus Labienus, and young soldiers felt their hearts pound. Every mention of the Senate's injustices stoked their loyalty. He promised fair rewards, land for veterans, gold bonuses, and honor for those who marched under his banner. His words united the exhaustion of long marches and Roman winter's chill under a higher purpose, fighting for justice and the glory of an empire. Comradeship was renewed, with cheers muffled by helmets, and the crackling fire seemed to echo the fervor of his oration. The army's morale, once shaken, soared to near religious heights. When a leader's voice inspires more trust than any weapon, an unbeatable army is born, and it's that trust that will guide Caesar's next moves. The peace offer and the final rejection. In late January of 49 BC, Caesar dispatched swift messengers to Pompey's camp, carrying a scroll sealed with Rome's emblem. In it, he proposed that both sides disband their armies simultaneously and submit the dispute to the Senate, a solution that promised to end the crisis without further bloodshed. Pompey, in his command tent, slit the seal and read the proposal by lantern light as advisors debated whether they could trust a Senate split by corruption and fear. Pompey's reply was curt. "I agree, but only if you deliver your troops first." To him, allowing Caesar's legions in Rome would grant him too much power. On hearing this, Caesar convened his staff at Forum Livii and spent hours in silent reflection. Surrendering his soldiers meant betraying those who had secured his victories. In Gaul, to refuse risked ending any chance of accord. Resolved, Caesar rejected Pompey's condition. Though it branded him bellicose, he recognized that giving up his strategic advantage would be political suicide. News spread along the roads. No peace would come without one side's total capitulation. Thus, what began as a diplomatic overture ignited the spark that would consume the civil war. Rejecting peace was a calculated act of boldness that sealed the Republic's fate and launched Caesar on an unstoppable advance, ready to reshape history. Conquest through Clemency, the strategy of sympathy. By mid-February of 49 BC, Caesar reached Asculum, reinforced by fresh troops. Distant banners marked the local garrison ready to resist, yet they found instead offers of peace. Caesar commanded his legions to spare homes, temples, and farmland. Rather than pillage, he offered municipal magistrates the city keys in exchange for guaranteed safety. As he walked the forum, he distributed coins and embraced civic leaders, making clear that his war was against the old oligarchy, not the people. The same approach succeeded in Tabernae and neighboring villages. Legionaries were strictly ordered not to loot. Instead of raiding granaries, they opened them to feed both soldiers and residents. The once fearful population began voluntarily providing supplies and vital intelligence on Senate-aligned troop movements. Caesar's calculated generosity quickly became living propaganda. Messengers carried tales of a leader who respected local customs, winning over peasants, artisans, and merchants. Entire communities raised small banners in his honor, shifting the balance of power without a single arrow fired. When mercy becomes a weapon, every heart won is a fortress conquered. And that's how Caesar cemented his victory without bloodshed. The siege of Cino and Enobarbus' surrender. In February of 49 BC, Caesar reached the walls of Cino, the last significant Pompeian stronghold in the region. Lucius Domitius Enobarbus had ordered wooden and stone ramparts, dug defensive ditches, and mounted catapults and ballistae on hastily built towers. His aim was to buy time until the reinforcements Pompey had promised arrived from the east. Yet after days of siege, the defenders' morale faltered. Exhausted soldiers, short on supplies and fearing Caesar's reprisal, learned that some comrades had already deserted, taking provisions and secrets of the defenses with them. Distrust and fatigue sparked a mutiny. Guards abandoned towers, siege engines went unmanned, and an entire cohort revolted, capturing Enobarbus in his own citadel. When Caesar dismounted before the surrendered gates, he found about 50 senators and knights, including Enobarbus himself. In a display of political acumen, he returned the money they had gathered to pay their garrison, declaring that a soldier's loyalty was worth more than silver. All he asked in return was an unconditional oath of loyalty. The surrender at Cino became the ultimate symbol of Caesar's strategic clemency. Rather than imitate Sulla's vengeance, he consolidated his power by mixing justice with mercy, undermining resistance throughout the peninsula. Enobarbus' surrender was the apex of strategic clemency. Next, see how Caesar turned this triumph into the momentum to pursue Pompey. Pompey escapes, the game Rebegins. Determined to capture his rival, Caesar advanced with 6 legions to Brundisium, the main port for the east. The harbor bustled with merchant ships fresh from eastern shipyards, laden with supplies and eager crews. Spotting the vessels, Caesar ordered hastily erected palisades to block access, but the frenetic loading and the pier's length made it impossible to seal every exit. In the pre-dawn mist of March 9th, gangplanks dropped and sails unfurled. Pompey, accompanied by his chief officers, boarded under the dim glow of lanterns, carrying not just troops, but renewed hope of rebuilding an army in the eastern provinces. Oars sliced the water as Caesar, mounted on his horse, watched in silence, conflicted by frustration at Pompey's escape and relief that lives were spared. Though he failed to capture him, Caesar knew the Roman civil war was far from over. That flight did not end the conflict, but marked the dawn of a new phase, where campaigns in foreign lands would decide Rome's fate. The crossing of the Rubicon, therefore, was merely the prologue to an epic pursuit that would carry legions across the Mediterranean. Even fleeing by sea, Pompey ignited battles that would span continents, and Caesar will press on with unrelenting march. If you enjoyed this journey through time and want more fascinating tales, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with your friends. That way, you help us keep bringing high-quality historical content. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.